in your opinion, why are we seeing more people leaving government service for the private sector at an earlier stage in their career? The obvious ones are things like money and opportunity, right? And I think you get a lot of people, you know, in the public sector where perhaps things aren't quite what they used to be from a pension standpoint, and things have just changed a huge amount. In the sneeze, excuse me. But in my opinion, all those things to one side, money and perceived opportunity, I just think we see more than we ever saw before. You know, again, I'm the son of a 72-year-old now, but 30-year flying squad policeman who didn't have the internet. So, you know, in terms of what my dad could see as to other opportunity, unless someone's ringing him up on a landline that does what I do for a living, which, you know, would have been picking one person out of the yard or one side of the river, it's impossible almost, right? So we just didn't see the same opportunity out there, you know, and the ability to reach out to people, it's so much shorter than it used to be. You know, it used to be an A to Z thing, and now it's an A to B thing, an A to C thing. So I just think we're seeing people seeing opportunity. My favorite stories are always when I talk to people that are in government and police or whatever, and they're looking to leave. And then I speak to them 10 years later and they say to me, well, you know, James, you're gonna have to buy my shares out, or, you know, and they say, they, you know, you need to pay me 130 grand now, you know. And I remember when they were only 35, and I think they're great stories. So I think there's opportunity, the packages are great, the career's great. And sometimes people are just a bit tired of, I guess, a public service sometimes. What certifications do I believe are the most appreciated in the market? For investigations, the CFE one, isn't it? The ACI doing some really great work over there, Steve Young and those guys. So definitely worth connecting to the ACI. I can email people with information around that. Simon Scales and those guys were talking about it, and we know them very, very well. They did some really good work around certifications and development, professional development. So I definitely recommend that. And of course, you have CFE. I do this whole. I think I'm quite confident and happy with being, you know, being fairly firm with the assertion those qualifications are all thought of. I think when we get in a security space, it becomes a little harder, because I think it becomes much more. I was corrected for saying this; it didn't translate very well, but much more horses for courses, right? I think it's very hard for someone to say, well, you shouldn't do CPP if you're at a certain point in your career. You should do an MBA, but that's no good if you're a security officer, right? Because you're not going to probably not going to do an MBA at that stage. But CPP, PSP would be hugely valuable. Is there any point in you going to do a CPP if you're the CSO of a Fortune whatever? Arguably, perhaps not. Maybe you could be doing something that's a bit more business focused, or something that will add some value to yourself personally and to the organisation that you work for. So it is truly horses for courses in that sense. But from an investigative standpoint, ACI and CFE is always is generally asked for or well received by my clients anyway. In terms of, we have a question here about how do we source candidates for a critical security mandate for our clients, and what are the factors that will make or break the chances of an application to be considered for the next stage. So I think first of all, there's some really kind of low-hanging fruit, obvious stuff that precludes people's right to work a lot of the time. You know, have you got the existing right to work in the country, the role you're applying for? It's often worth pointing out if you'll have the ability to work post your degree. Just always point out what right you have to work, and that's that shortest line. In terms of what we do beyond that, you know, we obviously will do the normal kind of, we run adverts and everything else, but that for us isn't hugely kind of rewarding. We don't tend to get a huge response. We get a huge response, but it's sometimes more quantitative over qualitative. How we go to market is we profile the market, and we map a market. So we look at country. Generally, first of all, you know, we look at the talent pool in country. We find that there's more and more crossover now industry to industry. Historically, it wasn't always the case, oil and gas to oil and gas, or consumer goods to consumer goods, and banking to banking. And now, if you look, there's lots and lots of that kind of moving across industry. So it's really incumbent on people to bring to life the why, and that's where we kind of get into the competency-based interview on our standpoint. We need people to bring to life the why. What you mustn't ever do is presume that people will just ask if they're not sure. That's the biggest thing that people do. Send us generic CVs and don't bring to life the experience that's relevant to the role they're applying for. So that's really, really important. Other enterprises looking for physical information security combined, and will CPP and CISM will work together on demand. But I still don't see that degree of convergence that everyone has been talking about for the past 10 years. I just don't see it. I see it happen. Of course, I see it on occasion, and we see it again, financial services perhaps, and you'll see some CSOs own everything, but I don't see many CSOs owning cyber and kind of physical. I just don't see it in the market at the moment, and it's been talked about forever, and I just don't see it changing at the pace that people think it will. I think a bigger problem for the profession is keeping those people that come into the sector earlier than historically they have done. So coming in at 35 into a senior leadership role, looking down the road 30 years, thinking, I don't know if I can just do physical security forever. And that's when I think we'll start seeing convergence. So I think you'll start seeing, maybe over the next 5 or 10 years, more and more of those examples. But that's just a bit of a guess, to be frank with you all. Red flags. I mean, I don't like to focus on the negative, but irrelevant CVs is a huge red flag. People that haven't read the profile is a huge red flag. Applying for 10 jobs in 10 countries all at once is something that you wonder if people have read the job description sometimes. But no, not really. We don't have, I mean, we're looking for a match, aren't we? So there's nothing as definitive as a red flag as such. Everyone's got some value and something to add. Whether it's proportionate and in the right context of the organisation that we're recruiting for is a different question. But no, I think red flags is probably a bit too definitive. Sounds a bit aggressive for me, red flag, to be honest with you. We have another anonymous question here. Any advice on what to retain and remove from CVs that are former law enforcement? So if I were former law enforcement, and just for the record, they wouldn't let me into the police. I applied twice, but they couldn't. The Metropolitan Police Service would not admit me at 19. So I'm not former, but I'm the son of a former, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of CVs and spoke to the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people coming out of law enforcement. Create a CV, a kind of, if you like, a bit of like a repository for everything, right? So we've got 30 years, 25, 30 years of experience. We're going to need a definitive document, aren't we? So we can create that. That can be 6 pages, that can be 8 pages, that can be 10 pages, that can be whatever it needs to be. But play your own story back to yourself, so you've got it all in there. Then, if you're coming out of the police and you're applying for an investigations role, that's where we're going to bring our investigations experience. If you're coming in looking to say more protective or more intelligence focused, that's what we'll do. So I think what to retain or remove is going to be predicated by the role you're applying for. Please don't try and do what a lot of people do, which is create 5 definitive CVs. Okay, I've done my career. I need an investigation CV, I need an intel CV, I need a security CV, I need a God knows what else CV. None of that matters. It's all irrelevant because it's all going to be nuanced at some point. So, in cricketing parlance, I would save your legs and not run for that one. I would just wait to see what comes up, work from that central, if you like, that central document, and build something in the correct context. from there on in. We've never had a better chance, or a better opportunity rather, to understand the pain of the organisation that we're going into. It's inexcusable. I've talked about being a busy fool before. It's inexcusable to just send generic CVs anymore. It's inexcusable just to send CVs that don't, if you really want the job, that aren't focused on the problems and issues that they might have. We are one Google away, we are one LinkedIn search away, whatever, from finding everything out about that organization. So is it a build program? Yeah, are we replacing someone? Is that a handle turner? We can find these things out. We can ask. We can, we can even ask the hiring manager what, can get a couple of minutes with them. Just get the temperature of the role, and then make sure that you do the best job. But please don't ever leave it on the premise that if people want to know, they'll ask, because in my experience, the volume of applications precludes people from just asking. We're different because it's either a vested interest in not only filling roles but creating a community that I'd like to be able to work with and draw on going forward. So we create these relationships. But when Fred blogs in, don't know, in talent acquisition function for a big corporate, is recruiting for a security director once every 5 years, does not want to be your friend, in my opinion. So yes, that's my take. Potential for expat hiring for mid-level professionals from Southeast Asian countries to Middle East European locations. We see expats in some parts of Asia. Singapore and Hong Kong seems to be ramping down. Singapore out of the two seems to be a bit busier, but it's not as straightforward as once was, from what I can see. We've seen from Southeast Asian countries into KL. That's been movement, so going as far as KL into the Middle East. Yes, we're seeing a demand for Arabic, though, in certainly in Saudi, which is clearly perceived as the growth market in that part of the world. In the Middle East at the moment, it isn't quite what it was. Again, the Dubai, Abu Dhabi, UAE in particular tends to look after itself, and one day I'll be really interested in looking at the numbers of people that have, in the security world or investigative world, have come from outside into that region in the last 5 years. I bet you it's not anywhere near as much as it was 5 years previous to that. So I think relocations and expatriate roles are just not anywhere near as common as they once were. It's a shame because they pay really well, but no, not as busy as once. Soft skill. Are there any particular soft or technical skills you've seen an increased demand for? Soft skills are everything. Now. I think when you get to an interview, certainly when you get to a second interview, technical skills probably aren't in question at that point. Probably aren't quite in question. What's in question is how you operate, how you leverage those technical skills. Again, how strong your soft skills are. I don't know the word fit. I always think fit's a misleading kind of way to describe it, but there is an organizational fit, arguably, that needs to be considered. But how good are you managing those stakeholder groups? How good are you managing up and down? We're doing some management work at the moment for a big oil and gas firm that it's really important that they can manage up, and you can pick the phone up when Exco calls and says, what does this mean? That you can say what it means. But then, of course, we have to work with people that are both ends of the scale, right? Entry level. Sometimes there'll be, I don't know, maybe some analysts or just new people to the business, and you've got to build those relationships. So for me, you can't walk into an organization, be great at what you do, and be tone deaf much anymore, if that makes sense. If that makes sense. So guys, I think we're coming to the end of this half an hour. Thank you for everyone's questions. Hopefully it was useful.